Hello and welcome to Research Sausage, where I discuss the origins of my research papers, hoping that this will help you in your path to generating your own research. So far, I have been discussing papers that grew out of my dissertation. There are plenty more, where I either explored particular features of the model I developed, introduced different policies into the model, or tested certain empirical implications of the model. However, I'd rather switch to a different topic, to a paper where I branched off in an entirely new direction. This new direction had to do with a link between financial development and economic growth. My co-author introduced me to a paper by Rajan and Zingales, where the authors explored the link between financial development and economic growth. They developed an industry indicator they called finance dependence, which they argued was linked to an industry's natural need for financing based on their technological characteristics. They found that industries that had higher finance dependence grew relatively faster in countries with higher financial development. They contended that this was the smoking gun that showed that financial development causes economic growth. Last time I checked, this was one of the top 100 most cited papers in economics. There is a glaring question here. The technology of production uses real resources to produce real output. In contrast, financing is not a real resource. It just enables the exchange of real resources. As a result, if finance dependence means anything, it must derive from some deeper technological feature. The question is, what is that feature? To answer this question, we first of all need a definition of technology. In economics, the technology of production is the production function. Thus, variation in technology across industries is equivalent to variation across industries in the production function. As a result, we can identify differences in technology across industries by measuring differences in the kinds of inputs used. First, we measured differences in the kind of input used in different industries. Then, we replicated the regressions in the original Rajan and Zingales paper, replacing their finance dependence measure with the various technological measures we had come up with. One measure stood out because it was both highly correlated with finance dependence and because it behaved similarly in the regressions. This measure was R&D intensity. This makes sense. First, R&D is an activity that takes time to pay off, so it would likely require upfront financing. Second, R&D generates intangible assets which are hard to use as collateral. This should be a particularly severe problem in an environment with low financial development. Third, technical progress is known to be the root of economic growth, and the whole point of R&D is to develop new technologies. In a companion paper, we developed an R&D-based growth model to better understand these findings. We showed that differences in industry growth are in fact statements about differences in economic structure, not economic growth.
No!
Still, if we assume that financial development doesn't harm economic growth in any particular industry, we can convert statements about differences in economic structure into statements about economic growth. Check it out! One thing about this paper was that there are many measures of technology, and we didn't really care which one came out the winner. This is useful to have a paper where you have many horses in the race, but you don't have your bets on any particular horse. This increases the chances that your research project will be successful, as opposed to being a dud. One last point. I was always confident that this was a valuable research project. However, we had to submit this paper about 10 times to different journals before it was published. Each time there was one favorable referee who understood what we were doing, and one referee who was negative. The main complaint to the negative referee was often something like, "How come we know finance dependence doesn't cause R&D intensity?" This is absurd. Clearly there were people who for some reason or another were wedded to the idea that finance dependence was itself an aspect of technology, and who saw this paper as a threat rather than as a valuable attempt to understand finance dependence and economic growth more deeply. My point is that if you take on an established literature, you may have to deal with haters. Through patience, persistence, and diplomacy, we defeated them. I hope you find this useful for developing your own research. Thank you, and until next time.